What's up, everybody? Hello, Medify. I want to talk about something that we're going to be covering in our deck, in our narrative to our investors. But I wanted to preface it here as well as experiment with Jaime's new studio that we got set up here. There's a really important thing that we need to communicate to our investors and to our future investors. So let's go over that right now. Let's click over here and let's look at the history of Bitcoin. If you guys can see this clearly, this is really, really important because I have been through 3 of these cycles. Technically, I've been through all 4 of the major bear cycles, but I wasn't really paying attention back in 13. I was kind of just hodling and buying stuff on the dark web. But here's what we need to know. If you look at the overall history of Bitcoin, right? If you scroll out here, you'll see that we are on target. We are exactly on target for the next bull run coming up. But let's describe this. If you go back in history, right, all the way back here to 2013, with the last major bull into a bear, into this green, you'll see that we go through the halvening, the 2012 halvening, into 13, which is right here. You have an amazing bull run, and then you go into a bear, and then you have this discovery period, this kind of uncertainty period, and then we move into the next halving at 2016. Now, again, 2017, many of you guys were there. 2017, we had an amazing bull run all the way up. Then we had a bear all the way through the 2018 and 19 doldrums. Some of you guys remember, you were there. And then we go through discovery. Right, discovery, and we go through this period of uncertainty trying to figure it out. We had the 2020 halving. We had an amazing bull run once again. And we had the COVID Black Swan event, which had its dip right over here. But it's still within the logarithmic trajectory of the overall history of Bitcoin. We are here today. So let's zoom in a little bit. We are here right now. So from a logarithmic standpoint, we are exactly on schedule in 2022, potentially all the way out to November. So this is important. November, where we see this resistance here. So this is, and then what we'll see again is the discovery area. Now, what we've known in the news is massive amounts of regulation, massive amounts of uncertainty, but also there has been some great news around where the overall regulation, where the overall sentiment, as well as what we see from legislation. We see more governors, more government officials. We see even President Biden talking about crypto regulation. And so we are going to be entering once again into an amazing discovery period. Now, what is really important to note here, and this is something that most people won't discuss, or maybe they just don't have the wherewithal about, is that this right here is a logarithmic pattern. This logarithmic pattern, what it does is it takes into consideration the entire history of Bitcoin and its current growth and adoption as it stands today. The problem is that when we move past early adoption into the early majority, when adoption really has taken hold, and when Bitcoin really is a ubiquitous thing in all of the world, every market's talking about Bitcoin, then this pattern from a logarithmic pattern will change to an exponential pattern. So I want to talk to you guys about this. This is really important. This is a graph, and I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. This is a graph by Jeffrey Moore. He wrote a great book called Crossing the Chasm. Crossing the Chasm shows the overall growth of an idea, a product, or a service to not only mass adoption, but then commoditization, where the value and the pricing goes down. What we have seen with Bitcoin, and this is so crucial, what we have seen in Bitcoin is that I have been, some of the OGs have been, the part of the early innovators. And as you can see, from the early innovators to the early adopters here, this is a logarithmic graph. It's almost straight, like this. right? It is only till we pass the chasm here, it's only till we pass the chasm here that we move and change from a logarithmic growth pattern to an exponential growth pattern. Don't miss this. We are right here in the chasm. We are in the chasm, which means right today, what are we? June 17th, 2022. We are entering into the most profound chasm moment for Bitcoin. We're seeing a regulation ramping up. We're seeing maturation or maturity of models for scale, models for compliance, models for regulatory audits. We've seen models for legal compliance improve. What's going to come out of this chasm of regulation, compliance, audit, KYC, AML, institutions, government entities, private, public, we are going to see, as we exit this chasm, the greatest growth of Bitcoin that has ever been recorded as we move into, as Jeffrey Moore calls, the early majority and the late majority. Again, don't miss this. From the innovators here to the early adopters right here, this is a logarithmic growth pattern. After we get through this chasm of undeniable churn and paper hands, we are going to change from a logarithmic growth pattern to an exponential growth pattern. And if you take a look at this exponential growth pattern will take over not only the early majority in red, but it will also cover the late majority until we get to a diminishing return point of the late adopters up here, in which most of the value will have been bled out. Which means to our investors, to invest in the chasm is to maximize growth potential 7 to 10 years out. This is the message. We are at the exact right time to actually be investing the most amount of money so that 5, 7, 10 years out, people will call us a genius. People will call us soothsayers and fortune tellers. They'll say, "How did you know?" And our simple response will be, we were the early innovators. We were the early adopters. We knew that we had to go through a chasm and a spasm period of the market, only to come out to the early majority, late majority, and bleed out every penny that we possibly can. This is the narrative that we need to play, because this is not only the narrative, this is actually the truth to history and the truth to form. So guys, I hope this was helpful. I hope it was encouraging. This is why we need to raise a lot of money now.